Hi, thank you for tuning in to Drinks with the Drag Queen. I'm Z St. Vontrel.
And I'm Universe.
And we are at the Fickle Peach.
With Chris Piche.
I chose for us
Hi, thank you for tuning in to Drinks with the Drag Queen. I'm Z St. Vontrel.
And I'm Universe.
And we are at the Fickle Peach.
With Chris Piche.
I chose for us a beer from Belgium called Rodenbach. It's one of the oldest breweries in the world. It started in 1821. They make sours, and what a sour is essentially is a spoiled beer. They make a beer with fruit, and then they put in lactobacillus, which is a bacteria that changes the flavor. It's more of a sweet tart. These guys are world renowned, have won many awards, and are owned by the Palm Brewery in Belgium now. They used to be family owned. You're gonna get a lot of cherry.
Yeah, it smells kind of fruity.
It is fruity. And it's one of the hardest beers in the world to make.
This is really, really
Yeah,
good.
it's delicious.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I wasn't expecting that taste.
And that back bite on your tongue is the sour, is the lactobacillus in the beer. We sell the devil out of this beer here, and it's one of our favorite styles of beer to sell from Belgium. And sours are exploding in the market. You'll see a lot of our craft brewers here in the United States making them. We call those kettle sours if they're not made in the same way, because it normally takes 2 years to make this beer. It's a long, dedicated process. Craft breweries are making what we call kettle sours, which are kind of quick and dirty. They make a beer, a fruit beer, and then they sour it real quick and they don't age it. And that's where the big difference is in cost and production.
Lovely.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. It's the perfect mix of sour and sweet. It's a very great in between.
Yeah, it's not like too sour. I was expecting something like it will make my tongue
Like Sour Patch
Yeah.
Kids.
Exactly.
But it's not too much.
We have a local brewery here called Guardian Brewery, and they have done several sours where they've stepped in, and they're kettle sours, but they're doing an amazing job with it. And they haven't won any awards yet that I know of on them, but it's a hard process to do, and it's a dangerous thing to do because you can spoil the rest of your beer in the brewery because if you worked with a wild yeast, if it gets away from you, it'll spoil every beer you have.
Oh wow.
So it's a delicate process, and you have to be on top of your game when you brew this beer, especially if you're doing it in a brewery where you're making everything. There's a brewery in Indiana called Upland Brewery in Bloomington, and they do a phenomenal job with their sours, and they have an entire house, a brewery that's a separate brewery where that's only what they make because they use the wild yeast and they don't want it to get away from them and into their other brewery. So like nothing goes from brewery A to brewery B. If it's in the sour house, it stays there. You don't use any equipment, no boots. It's with COVID, it's actually kind of interesting that their PPP or PPE was in place with what they were doing with
Already.
their beers with yeast, because it'll attach to your clothes, and then if you get it in the regular brewery, you're dumping a bunch of beer.
Oh wow.
And you said it took 2 years, this?
It takes 2 years to mature. Rodenbach has 278 barrels, and they're all marked. Some are as big as this room. They're gigantic vats. They're wood barrels. And number 1 barrel, all three of us couldn't sit around. It's small, and it's been shaved down and used because once that wood has the bug in it, the bacteria, they let it stay in because that's what makes the beer. So after they produce the beer, it takes 2 years to mature. This one is their Alexander, which is one of the most sought after beers in the world because they quit brewing it for 10 years. So at one point, these were selling, the large format bottle of 750 milliliters was selling for $5,000 a bottle because they thought it was never going to be brewed again. Thankfully, Rodenbach brought it back, and it's named for one of the sons that opened the brewery, Alexander. But this is their very top end beer. They make one called Grand Cru, which is 1/3 mature beer and 2/3 what we call young beer. So it's just the fresh squeezed raspberries and cherries. And then they add this, the sour to it, and they blend it. But this is their top of the line.
I can see why. It tastes really good.
Yeah, it's delicious.
I like it. I wasn't expecting that.
I wasn't either. Took 2 years, and 2 years well worth it.
Yes, it is.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So how did you get started with Fickel Piche?
We've been here 15 years, and I opened this business. My nickname is Peach. My last name is Piche. My business partner, who has since passed, Brian Fickle, opened this with me, and we were struggling for a name. And my wife and I were driving back with our kids from southern Indiana, and we're both deadheads. So we were going through lyrics, we were going through names, and we were going through songs, and we just didn't want to be sued by the Grateful Dead because you can't use their material very often without getting sued by them. And my wife looked at me and she goes, "Just call it the Fickle Peach." And I was like, "I don't know, honey. And she goes, "No, it says everything. Everyone knows Brian is Fickle. Everyone knows you as Peach. You've been bartending in this town, both of you, for years. It's a perfect name." So we settled on it and we bounced it around with our friends and everyone loved it. So it's been something that I'm very happy that we chose it. We've used it and, we developed our brand as passionately dedicated to great beer. So it wasn't so much worried about the name and what people thought of it anymore, as that what it stood for as Brian and I and our standards with beer. We are in an old bank. This was the Muncie Banking Company owned by O.W. Store. There was a school named here for him, an elementary school. Sadly, they tore it down. There was a store scholarship at Ball State in his name, which used to be a full ride when he set it up in the 40s, but it's now probably like enough to pay for the meal ticket of your meal ticket at Ball State. It has the original tin, the original marble. The bar is actually built upon the Teller line. Where you're sitting is where the president's office was. Where you're sitting was the vice president's office. That used to be a mezzanine where the employees sat and drank. I've met a lot of people that worked here, especially ladies who are older now, but they come in and they cannot believe that we've saved the space. Before I got my hands on it, the building sat empty 10 years until my wife and I and my in-laws, we bought the building and then we started developing it.
So within 10 years, you guys started building it and stuff like that, or?
No, the building sat empty 10 years before we got our hands on it. And when we bought it, we started immediately to develop the space. I was not going to get back into the bar business, but we decided to because we had tried to rent this space for 18 months and it was just offices with 8-foot ceilings. It was pretty ugly. So I looked at my father-in-law and said, "I'm good at the bar business. Let's just put in a bar. I'll pay the rent and we'll make a go of it." And 15 years later, we're still plugging along.
Well, so I had heard that the vault is now a refrigerator. Tell me how you came up with the idea to make the vault.
Okay, there are two vaults. There's the one in the basement, which was the records vault, and then there's the one up here, which is the money vault. They both are 2.5-foot poured concrete walls. So they're already just naturally great for refrigeration. We lined them and sealed them and then lined them with styrofoam and then wrapped them in Marlite, which is a wipeable surface, cleanable surface. And we decided we wanted the records vault to be our draft beer cooler. And we drilled through the wall with a diamond tip bit. It took us 4.5 hours to get through the wall because of the rebar and the depth of it. And then we changed this into a walk-in just because who doesn't love to say I keep my beer in a vault? So it's sort of like a wine cellar.
Yeah.
And it's conveniently located right at the bar.
Lovely.
It's actually, it's very inventive. I love that.
Any other questions?
Anything interesting about this? Like any stories about it or any history about it?
About the bank?
The building or yeah?
Well, one of the interesting things about O.W. Store is that he was a common man's banker. When you couldn't get money from the regular banks in Muncie, you went to O.W. and he was known to write risky loans. He also was known that when the bank auditor showed up, there was one room upstairs that they put him in. He put the lowest voltage light bulb that he had. If it was winter, he nailed the window open slightly. If it was summer, he nailed the window shut so that the auditor got in and was uncomfortable and got out. We have not found it, but the rumor is that he built a bunker in the third basement, which is in below All Yeah Comics next door, for he and his wife, because the Cuban Missile Crisis scared him so much. There is OSB and a platform in the front of that basement that we've never torn up, but supposedly that is where his private bunker was that he had built because he was terrified of a nuclear war. And I do believe that OW still haunts this place. We've had issues with ghosts.
That's what I was looking for.
I had one employee in particular, every day that she opened on Saturdays, that was always her shift. She would come in, open up, and there's a process to opening up, and we turn on the beer gas, which is the pressure that pours the beer. And I would come in 2 hours later, 3 hours later, and go, Ange, why didn't you turn on the gas? You miss this every time. She goes, I turned it on. I swear to you, I turned it on. So she started filming turning it on her phone to prove that she did it. And every time I came in, the valves, because each keg has their individual valve, were turned off. Wow. And I swore to her she did something that OW just messed with her and hated her. After Ange quit, that stopped. So Ange definitely ticked off OW some way, but we're not sure how, because she's a sweetheart. But she did piss off OW's store. We know of 3 people that have lost their fingers to the vault door when they were shutting it. 2 were employees of the bank. They tried to stop it with their hand and it cut their finger off. Oh 2 ladies. And then one guy, when a previous owner of the building, he and his buddies were in here drunk, messing around, and they shoved the vault door, and one of them tried to stop it, and it cut his finger off also. So needless to say, we don't move the vault door very often.
Yeah, I can see. Oh my God.
It just takes fingers off around here. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for joining us with Drinks with Drag Queens. I'm Universe.
I'm Z St. Vontrel.
I'm Chris Piche.
And thank you for tuning in. Happy
Cheers.
Pride.
Happy Pride.
Cheers.